Ron DeSantis is starting to attack former President Trump pretty regularly on the campaign trail, and one line of attack is about trusting Dr. Fauci.
I think he did great for 3 years, but when he turned the country over to Fauci in March of 2020, that destroyed millions of people's lives.
Well, tonight we have new reporting from CNN's K-File on how DeSantis has definitely changed his tune on Dr. Fauci. My panel is back. We're also joined by Andrew Kaczynski from the K-File. Okay, so tell us what you've found about what DeSantis used to say versus what he is saying today about Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, that's right. There is some pandemic revisionism going on with these DeSantis attacks on Donald Trump. Now, he is attacking Trump for praising Fauci. We've seen his campaign do that. We've seen that he said that he turned the country over to Fauci. Now, DeSantis was praising Dr. Fauci in March and April of 2020 at the exact same time that Donald Trump was. DeSantis in Florida was citing Dr. Fauci's guidance. I think he said he deferred to his judgment to put in place these policies that he's now referring to as lockdowns. Now, take a listen to this clip here of DeSantis talking about Fauci in March 2020.
We chose freedom over Fauciism, and the state of Florida is better off as a result of doing that. From Dr. Birx to Dr. Fauci to the vice president, who's worked very hard, the Surgeon General, they are really doing a good job. It's a tough situation, but they're working hard.
Yeah, I mean, so basically nowadays on the campaign trail, he's acting as though Dr. Fauci was some sort of totalitarian who, was forcing everybody into lockdown. But back then, I mean, you even found from that same speech, I believe, where he said that Dr. Fauci was really, really good and really, really helpful. So what changed?
And, what's interesting about this is it's almost ironic in that Trump and DeSantis pretty much have the same position on the pandemic. Like, this is not some investigative hit where we're going back 30 years. This was 3 years ago. We all remember this. Trump was calling in April and May to open up the country. Trump was attacking Dr. Fauci on Twitter. He was making statements in April of May of 2020. And who was one of the first governors to open up? Ron DeSantis. And then Donald Trump ended up praising him for it.
But so then, Andrew, to that point, isn't it possible that Governor DeSantis has just evolved or changed his position in terms of whether or not businesses should have been closed?
No, he absolutely has changed his position.
But I mean, maybe not in a hypocritical way. He just feels differently.
What we're seeing here from him is they're attacking the Trump campaign. They're taking quotes from Donald Trump where Donald Trump is saying, oh, we needed to shut down the country. He's talking about March. He's talking about April of 2020. These were the shutdowns. These are the same shutdowns that Ron DeSantis advocated in Florida. So what the DeSantis campaign is doing is they're maybe possibly cherry picking a quote from Trump here or there to say that Trump supports shutdowns. But as we all remember, Trump was right out there and he took a lot of heat for that when he was calling for these reopenings so early in the spring.
Now, can you imagine a politician cherry picking a quote out of context?
We're about to watch
changing their tune.
Ron DeSantis is going to twist himself into a pretzel you'd buy at the mall. And that's what that's running after Trump, untrumping Trump, over-trumping Trump, under-trumping Trump. It's hard to find the line where the Trump people still like you and the independents like you too. And I don't know if Ron can do that, being more Trump, but also less Trump than Trump. Honestly, I'm confused.
So will this about face, will people hold it against Ron DeSantis?
The Trump people will, and I think Andrew's, as usual, K-File strikes again to point out the hypocrisy. I think the question is whether hypocrisy still sticks in a Trump Republican Party.
True, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It used to be the unforgivable sin in politics. That was before Donald Trump.
It doesn't stick on Trump.
Yeah, but I think the larger point is, look, in the beginning of March, everyone's galvanizing, and then all of a sudden, not only the pandemic kicks in, but that particular form of cynicism that says what unites us with the Republican base is to own the libs, and then all of a sudden to demonize Dr. Fauci and fundraise off of demonizing Dr. Fauci.
What do you think, Congressman?
Well, while it was the worst of times when COVID first hit, my best memory of it was how well everyone was working together, whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're the president, Congress, mayors, governors. I was here in New York with a President Trump, a Governor Cuomo, and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and everyone just wanted to work together to get stuff done. For the first few weeks, quite frankly, no one really knew exactly what was happening. what we did know is that we needed to be as best prepared as we can for what could end up being the worst case scenario. And really, it's hard to find contrast and division in those initial few weeks. And it doesn't matter whether you are the furthest left or furthest right, what party you are, or what level of government you are. Everybody was working together.
What do you think about Governor DeSantis now changing his tune?
So I think, well, after you get through those first few weeks, and as more information starts coming out, now you have governors taking two very different paths across the country. There was different schedules for reopening. There was different policies on masks, and then different policies on vaccine mandates. Governor DeSantis was somebody who was one of the first governors who was seeking to reopen his state. I remember Governor Kemp doing that in Georgia, and it was a big contrast and controversy with these other states where they're saying, hey, you can't reopen this quickly. And there are other states at the other extreme that were volunteering themselves to be the last to reopen.
But does that make Dr. Fauci's advice in March of 2020 now wrong?
My biggest concern back in March, April was, that Dr. Fauci was still looking at this from a health standpoint. Mm-hmm. And there were so many other dynamics of it. There were impacts on kids, on their, getting them back into school, the remote learning, not having access to broadband. And that's just one specific example. The impact on the economy. Dr. Fauci he was not there to be an economic expert. Mm-hmm. So what I think would have been much better if you were to overanalyze that moment is if you had, if somebody is there as a health expert or health experts, and you also have people who are economic experts and folks who are out there sticking up for the kids, and you're coming up with decisions that are more of a balance, then I think that there would have been a better solution struck. Yeah. But it is true for Governor DeSantis to talk about how he was one of the first states, one of the first governors to be reopening. But go back to March, everybody was getting along at every level of government.
What's getting in your craw, John?
I think it's that the politicization of the pandemic ended up contributing to the deaths of over 1 million Americans. And I think what Lee is saying is those initial days when we were united, in some ways that showed the best of the country in rallying to a crisis. And then the politicization of the pandemic occurred. And different states had different solutions, which is difficult to do during a pandemic. The laboratories of democracy, as we all know they are. But that politicization ended up spreading disinformation, and that contributed to the deaths of people who didn't need to die.
And I don't remember Dr. Fauci stopping Ron DeSantis from doing anything that he did as Florida governor. So I don't know.
He was critical of him in July.
Dr. Fauci was critical of him in July.
He was critical of the
because he was taking it from a medical point of view,
Yeah. Yes.
and Ron DeSantis was taking it from a business and economic point of view.
Also, then the kids needed to be in school.
Yes, and so when he now calls Dr. Fauci a destructive bureaucrat, that is different than how he felt about him.
And I
when he
think
was taking his guidance.
A big part of this too is that the attacks on Trump, are hypocritical because the quotes that he's using to attack Trump are from that same time period that like Congressman Zeldin said, where everybody was along the same page.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much for unearthing this and sharing it with us, Andrew. Great to see you.